Okay, so now our to-do list app can add items, remove items, and mark items off as complete. So that's great. But how useful is a to-do list app that doesn't persist data? It actually defeats the whole purpose of wanting to remember and acknowledge what you've done. So in the state of our current app, if we wanted to add an item such as persist data, that item is going to be removed since it's part of our DOM manipulation. It's going to be removed if we were to navigate away from this page and come back, or simply on a refresh. Our item's gone. So how are we going to tackle this problem? A more standard implementation of solving a problem like this might be sending this data to a back-end server somewhere. But we are working within the front end, so what's available to us? Well, we're going to use something that's relatively new, and it's called local storage. It may also be referred to as HTML5 storage or DOM storage. But what local storage is simply a way for web pages to save key value pairs on the web browser. So basically, the client's browser, my browser or your browser, for instance, has access to this database where if we navigate away from this page and come back, whatever in our local storage for this web address is going to persist. So let's go ahead and open local storage. Using the DevTools, you can go ahead and hop into the tab there that you may have noticed called Resources. So Resources is where we're going to access our local storage. Let's go ahead and open up our local storage. So when we go into our local storage, you're going to see just, for now, probably an empty database here that has a key and value pair. So how's this going to work for us? So our key in this case is going to be just our identifier. It's really just a reference. So in our case, it might be something like item list. And the value is going to actually just be our HTML. It's going to be our list items that are being created. We are going to save that entire block of HTML to our local storage. And then when the page loads again, it's going to re-render that so the user can still access their previously added to-do list items. Don't worry if local storage sounds a little confusing right now. It's definitely a more complex concept, and I'm going to link some more resources for it in the show notes. But for now, let's start working with it in our code. All right, so let's talk about how this is going to work. I basically said that we're going to save the entire block of HTML to the local storage, and it's going to get rendered whenever the page is revisited. So where are we going to start? Well, we want to save local storage when something happens, when an item gets added or removed or marked as completed. Those are all points we want to say, hey, local storage, update yourself because something has changed. So to begin, that's just going to give you a clue where we're headed. Each time that we're editing our list, we're going to have to update local storage. So let's begin with our add, when these list items are first getting added to our list. So within our add function here, and in our conditional statement code, after we know we have a valid item and we want to create a new list item for it, that's a great point for us to say, local storage, go ahead and update your value because there's something new added to this list. So the way we're going to access local storage, it's nothing we have to declare. It's actually provided to us already. JavaScript has a local storage object, which we're going to access just by simply writing local storage. Now, local storage has its own API and methods available for us to use. And with something like local storage or any other database, one of the most common things you're going to do is set the value or get the value. So in this case, we're going to have to do both. But considering we're adding an item, what do you think we're going to need to do in this case? That's right. We're going to need to set the value. So how are we going to do that? Well, I told you that there's its own API, so let's start with that. There's a method available to us called setItem. So that's on the local storage API, and what's passed into setItem is a key as well as a value. So in this case, our key can be anything that's going to help us identify what's being stored. So I think a useful key in this case might just be something like list items. So let's just go ahead and call our key list items. And what's our value going to be in this case? Well, the value I had mentioned is actually just going to be the entire HTML block of that unordered list. So going back here, we have our unordered list, and this is actually what we're going to save to our local storage. So returning back to our JavaScript, we've actually referenced this item here. We've selected it. So this is actually going to be our value in this case. But specifically, the value of this is going to be the HTML, not this jQuery object that we have saved. We actually just want the raw HTML that's inside it. So in order to access that, we're going to use this HTML method. So let's go ahead and try that out. Let's save this and hop back into the browser for now. So I'm going to refresh the page. And I'm going to add my to-do list item. My to-do list is still trying to persist data. So going to add this to the list. And immediately we've seen that nothing's changed. But local storage, in order to see the new items added to it, we unfortunately have to actually refresh this. So upon refreshing the page, we can see that there actually was now a key value pair added to our local storage. Our key is list items. And our value in this case is actually just the data. That's our list item with the persist data text that we put in there. But where is it on the page? Well, we haven't told the web page that it needs to load what's in local storage when the page renders. So returning back to our code, before we even begin adding, editing, or removing items, we want to say, let's load what's in your local storage already. So I already told you what the most two common things you will do when interacting with the database. You will set items. In this case, we set an item, but you'll basically be setting values to update them, or you'll be getting values. So now that we want our local storage items to be added to the page immediately upon the page loading, what do you think we're going to do? In this case, we're actually going to need to get the items out of local storage. So how are we going to do that? So to begin, working with the local storage API again, let's access the local storage object. And instead of setting items this time, we're actually going to get item. It's a little confusing that the method available to us is get item and we're storing a list of items in this case, but in local storage, we're saving all those items as a single item. So everything will be saved under that list item key. So anyways, what we're going to do in this case, as opposed to passing the key and the value, is just actually pass the key. All we need to pass is our list items key, and what's going to be returned to us in this case is the value. So now that we have the value, what are we going to do with it? Well, we got our items, and what we actually need to do is have them appear on the page. So where are they going to appear on the page? Well, we looked at it down here, which is that they're actually going to be within our unordered list with an ID of list items. So in this case, we're going to access our unordered list again, and we're going to use that same HTML method, but in this case, we don't need to retrieve the HTML, we want to set the HTML. We want to update the HTML, which when the page loads, as you know, is non-existent, and we want to say, render what's in local storage for us. So this is how we're going to do it. Let's hop back into the browser and give this a spin. Back in the browser now, let's go ahead and refresh the page. We can see that just upon doing that, our code is now looking for that key list items in local storage and rendering the value within the unordered list. So inspecting the element here, just to drill this point home, we have our unordered list with the ID of list items, and this code here is saying, Okay, that's our selector. We selected that element, and we want to update your HTML. So in this case, appending, as we know, actually inserted a new HTML element into whatever was selected. In this case, we don't even want to specify an element in particular. We are just saying we want to update your raw HTML. So now let's go ahead and make it so when you remove items or update items, such as marking it off as complete, that also gets saved in local storage.